Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life was Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout Massachusetts. Currently, the communities he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and Easthampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. And his tours spotlight on the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, and also various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. So in today's episode, we will be discussing the East Street Cemetery, located in Easthampton, Massachusetts. So why is the East Street Cemetery called that?
Well, if you go to the East Street Cemetery in Easthampton, you'll notice that it seems to be nowhere near East Street at all. Alright? But East Street was the nearest street to it. And this cemetery at one time had a long driveway from East Street into the cemetery itself. And it wanted the land to be far away from any of the farms. Now, the land was donated by Eliakim Clark, right? And he's also buried within this cemetery. So, if you look at the names, the modern names, they're quite different from just East Street. So that confuses people, but if you use your GPS, you'll be able to find it quite easily. Now, today we're going to discuss what's outside the cemetery, because there is a historical stone outside there. And we're going to talk about what's inside the cemetery. And then between them is the gates. And the gates are important too, because they were donated. Now, inside the cemetery, you have a lot of people that are important to the history of the cemetery itself, and also of this area. So, sure, there might be the main cemetery of Easthampton somewhere else, but this was a good neighborhood cemetery for the people that lived in this area. Now, inside the cemetery, there also happens to be a tomb for a family, and it's small, and it's hard to figure out how the name plate, the entablature, is now on the ground, and where would it have been before. But it's there, and we'll talk about that.
And what is the plaque outside the cemetery for?
Alright, if you go outside the cemetery, you'll find a plaque. And his plaque is there because he's very important in the history of Easthampton. The plaque will say Samuel Jennings, left for dead by the Indians after the Pascomic Massacre, May 13, 1704. The first person to begin the resettlement of Pascomic in 1717. And he died in 1776 at age 83. He's buried within this East Street Cemetery. So he's very important in the history of Easthampton. He was one of only a few that survived a massacre that I believe killed like 17 people or so in Easthampton. And after a few years in Northampton, he came back to Easthampton. And still, they were very wary about the Native Americans. Would they attack again? And the burial location for those people, those 17 people or so that died in that massacre, has been lost. And the burial location for the people that died before that massacre in this tiny community is also lost. It's in some farmer's field, and no one really knows where it is. But he has an extra stone outside. He is buried inside, and he has a gravestone tablet inside. So this rock and plaque is not his gravestone, right? But it's nice to honor him, probably one of the most important people in the history of Easthampton itself.
And really quick before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, for more information or to sign up for various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can also find videos and podcasts of the stops along each of his tours, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, and his tours make for fun, educational, outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, what is the tomb for?
Right, this is a tomb that is not there as a holding tomb for burials during the winter, and in the early spring to take them out and bury them. It was not there. It was not a situation where it was used for that. Easthampton had one in its Main Street Cemetery, and that would have been used for all the cemeteries around town. This is a tomb for a family only. And the family itself is the Luther Clark family, and there's an entablature on the ground in front. It probably was somehow connected to above, but it gives on the entablature Luther Clark's family tomb, 1839. So the first person to be buried in this family was buried here in that year, 1839. And if you look at it, you start to wonder how was the entablature arranged above, and what was his family like? Who were the other people buried here? It's not very obvious. It's not even obvious when he died. And so there's a little mystery here, but it's not a town-wide tomb to hold bodies. It's just probably for his wife and maybe a few kids. And that's it. It's okay. Look, it's taking care of the grass cut on top of it, but it's strange the entablature is now on the ground, and other pieces of the entrance are on the ground. I don't know what they're doing down there. But it would be nice to know, see an old picture, see how the arrangement of this inscription entablature was in the past.
And who had the gates made?
Alright, the gates are very special, and they have a nice plaque on them that tells you who exactly, who gave the money, who is it in honor of, so forth. Now, if you read the gates, it says, Gateway and fence erected by Jerome A. and Margaret M. Lyman, in memory of Elijah Austin Lyman and Sophronia P. Lyman, 1935. All right, now, if you go looking for them in the cemetery, all four of these people are there. All right, and you also notice that the last one itself, the last person in this cemetery, was buried 2 years before the plaque was put up. So that was Margaret, and she was the last of the four to die. They found in her will a request to build the gate system and put a nice wrought iron fence around the cemetery, a nice wrought iron gate between the two columns, and to put a plaque on the cemetery telling them who donated the money and why. So it's for her mother and father-in-law, and it's also for, of course, her husband who died a little bit earlier than she. Now, all four of these people are buried within the cemetery. Their names are on one gravestone, and so they're easy to find. It's a big tombstone itself. So this nice gift was given after the fact by the Lyman family.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And check out a large selection of other podcasts at his website, as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you, and hope you join us again.